Because people can get hold of you wherever you are. Okay.
All's happy?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I would like to start off with this. That's why it's here.
Okay.
Okay. My name is Willem Fransman. I grew up in. I was born in Worcester on a farm where they produce wine, grapes to produce wine. And I when I was very young, we used to sit under the vineyards, and you could just take one of the branches, and you just ate to your heart's desire. But nowadays it is not like that, you know. You're so worried about poisoning, so you don't do that anymore. I grew up on a wine farm in Worcester, in the Overberg, Hex River Valley, in the rural parts of Cape Town. I was about 3 when my father decided, well, this is time now to move on. My father was a difficult man to live with. That was in the days of apartheid. And he never called the Boer baas, as they call it, the affectionate name that the farm owners used to be called. He refused to call a Boer baas. So he called them meneer or sir. And they didn't like the idea. So after 2 or 3 months of stay on the farm, my father was forced to leave the farm. So we had sort of a circus life at first when I was born. My first 3, 5, 6 years was the life of not 6 years. First, from my birth until my 5th year, we were like nomads. 3 months on the farm, then my father was kicked off the farm, so we must move on. My mother could never, and that was her words, put up a nice home for us, because my father was like a circus boss. You stay 3 months on the place, you pack up your stuff, you go. So finally, we land up in a place called Grabouw, also in the Boland, or the regional, the rural areas of Cape Town. And there I was part of it was part of an apple farm, not wine this time, but apples. So I said to myself, you know, I was born in Worcester, raised in Grabouw, but only for 3 months. And then we moved to this place where we're sitting right now, called Tiervlei by that time. Today it's Ravensmead. And Ravensmead, it was named after Ravensmead because Ravensmead was the oldest street in this vicinity. So, why I have this apple in my hand? Well, because of that farm where we used to stay. So, this apple came from my own apple tree on my own yard. I would like to cut it in front of you so you can just get the smell of my apples from my apple tree.
Not a taste.
You can have a taste as well. See, this is apples from my apple tree, and I'm staying in town where we don't have that much. Can you pick up the smell? Yes. I will send my knife around. You can have a bit of my apple too. You can take my knife.
Okay.
And this is a Leatherman. It's not just a knife, it's a Leatherman.
It smells very good. Yeah.
So my very first day of school, I went within my little bag, what was a plastic bag. It was an apple or 2, and it was big apples because they made apples, or they produced apples for the export market. And because it was too big, they gave it to us, the farm workers, farm laborers. And we could take this to school. And we had these apples at school, and peaches as well. So, my very first day of school, I can remember having a nice, big, juicy apple in my hand. And since that day, I like apples more than any other fruit. That's why it's here today as well. But my story goes further. So, after 3 months after 6 months, because that far my father stayed 6 months, not 3 months. So at the end of that period of 6 months, it was the end of the quarter, almost the end of the quarter. My father got instructions from the Boer. He must leave the farm because he's rude to the farmer. He's not willing to say boss to him or boss to him. So my father told us this will be the last week of school. So my teacher, by then, I just know her as Juffrou, as we call her, or Miss. She addresses the class. She said to the class, by the end of the day, one of our students were leaving us for good. And she was wondering what she can give this child to take with him so that he can read wherever he went to, because she was not sure if we will go to another school. So she gave this book to me. And if I open this book, I would like you to focus on the date within this book. She told me, listen Willem, you must read. She gave me this book and I will open it. There is the date of the book that she gave me. 22nd of June 1965. That was my very first year at school. And my very first gift that I got from my own teacher. And it's called Van Golgotha tot Hemelvaart. From Golgotha to, what you call it now?
The Ascension.
The Ascension. So within that period, this book, but you can see some of the books are torn, it's gone. But I still have this as my gift from my teacher. So a name was in here, from Miss Gillian, no initials, from Miss Gillian to Willem Fransman. So I cherish this. Not me, but my mom. She cherished. My mom couldn't read. My mom could read, but she could not write. So she cherished this book for me all these years. And when my mom died, she gave this, she asked my sister to give this book back to me, because it's mine. But this book made of me a writer. Because every time I opened this book, at first I saw this Christ on this page. The Christ was the cross. And I said to myself, this was stupid people to crucify so good a man. And I said to myself, one day I would like to give answers to the people. Why did you crucify this man? And the other thing was, I would like to get hold of my teacher again. And I couldn't, because there was no initial. And then one day, the University of the Western Cape, and that was now years later, within myself was a burning desire to write. I was 5 years old when I decided I will become a writer one day.
Mm-hmm.
My mother was listening to Springbok Radio, that was a national radio station here, to the stories, as we call it, the radio dramas on radio. And I said to myself, one day I would like to write a radio drama for my mom. And all of a sudden, it kicked in. One day, years later, I was a married man by that time. There was this competition on radio. And I decided, Radio Sonder Grense and Sanlam, I would like to write a still story now. And I wrote a play called Om te bedel is 'n kuns. To beg is a form of art, to translate it loosely now. And it won the first prize, the first place. And it was broadcasted on radio. And the night before I called my mom, I said to her, Mama, I wrote a play for you, for radio. And she called all the friends around the table. And when I called, it was about 5 minutes before it will be broadcasted, she said to me, I called her, she said to me, no, we're ready. We have our tea here and our cookies, we're ready now for your play. And then it was broadcasted. Oh, and it was days before cell phones, eh? So the home phone was ringing after the play was sort of broadcasted. Even people from KwaZulu-Natal called me, almost the outcast of the British Empire, as they call it. They called and, I was so glad. I wrote a play for my mom for radio. Then I was chuffed, because that was now in 1997. I was the very first person of color to win this competition up until now, and it's now his 15th year, I think. I was the very first person to win it, and the first person of color. So I said to myself, well, I'm a writer now. So University of the Western Cape had a competition for writers, and I decided, well, my wife decided, you must write a story. One of your stories, because I was a storyteller by that time. She said, you must write a story, and I will write a story too, and then we will see what happened. And the both of us was chosen to be one with, two of us with 11 other poets. The poets, prose writers, to go to the University of the Western Cape workshop at Paternoster. And this is where it all started, my journey to Paternoster. Die reis na Paternoster. I don't know if you've got a book like this. I would like to present to you
Thank you.
a book like
kindly.
this. That is where the Afrikaans Writers Association was finally born, sort of. Not born, but the inception of it. You know, like husband and wife got together, all the writers in South Africa got together and they decided, this is what we must do. So that is the process of the inception of the Afrikaans Writers Association. So it was published by University of the Western Cape. Okay, so the product of that workshop at Paternoster was this book called Literator. It's a publication of the University of Potchefstroom by that time. Professor Hans du Plessis was then the demonstrator, or he taught us how to write short stories. And at the back of this book, there was a few writers that attended the skryfkursus for Swart Afrikaans writers. And one of those was my wife and I. And some people like Diana Ferris was also there. Heinrich Weingart was there. Kirby van der Merwe was there. So it's almost a creep of the writers of color that was there. Nikosa was there too. So this portion of the book was reserved for that writers. So this is where this was my first publication of a short story, and that short story was called, I will give the title to you right now, A Bok vir 'n Gaping. A Bok vir 'n Gaping, that is the title. So that story has a spin-off. It was published in this book as well, and it was published in, no, not this one, in this book. So that story had now 3 publications. So I said to myself, but I'm not the one story wonder. I would like to have more. So I wrote more stories, but there was I was just but a week away from Paternoster when I sat in the train, and there was a laborer on the opposite side of the train on the train bench, and he said, he looked at me and I looked at him, and he looked so tired. And I said to myself, as if this guy told me, listen man, you're a poet, write a poem about me. So he was sitting over there, I was sitting here, and I said to myself, man, write this poem. And I was taking out my notepad, and I was scribbling. And at home I just typed it neatly, and I didn't change a word of the poem. So now I will recite that poem. En so sit ons almal in die 3rd class compartment. Ons gaan huis toe nou, swaar gejog die hele die dag. En die laan het gatjie vir jou mercy, want jou getalstene moet jy lê. Wat soos ek nou voel, lyf seer, nakkels is neef af van die stene op die site. Sometimes I wish ek so, ek wen die lotto. Dan sal ek nog een keer terug gaan na my baas toe, om my laan in sy office lekker kak te vertel.